If you've ever looked back at a single moment in time, just one, and felt a quiet ache swell in your chest. The kind that says, "I wish I had done that differently," then this story was made for you. Regret doesn't always come with fireworks. It doesn't scream, it doesn't slam doors or throw punches. Sometimes, it shows up like a whisper in the middle of the night, a small thought that won't leave you alone, a memory that stings, not because it was painful, but because you never gave it a chance to be beautiful. In youth, regret is sharp, loud. It arrives in heartbreak, in failure, in public shame. But after 70, regret changes shape. It becomes quieter, but heavier. It doesn't wrap itself around missed promotions or broken resolutions. It curls up instead around the words we didn't say, the people we let slip away, the parts of ourselves we tucked in the back of a drawer and forgot to open again. A few months ago, I saw an elderly couple sitting together on a park bench. They weren't talking, just sitting. Their hands, spotted and trembling, were still clasped together, and as she leaned her head against his shoulder, he closed his eyes and smiled. I couldn't help but wonder, how many times did they almost give up? How many fights were softened by forgiveness? How many words had they spoken? And how many had they never needed to? That moment stayed with me. It reminded me that love, in the end, is measured not just by time, but by expression. So today, I want to share with you the 5 regrets most people carry quietly after a lifetime of noise. The kind of regrets that don't shout, but linger. And more importantly, how you can begin softening them now, while there's still time. But first, I want to ask you something simple, yet often avoided. What's one thing you still have time to do, but haven't done yet? Maybe it's a letter you never wrote, a dream you tucked away, a conversation you've rehearsed 100 times in your head, but never spoken aloud. If something just came to mind, even faintly, even just a flicker, write it in the comments. Not for me, not for anyone else, but for you. Because sometimes, naming what we want is the first quiet act of courage, the beginning of finally living without that weight. Regret number 1. I waited too long to say what I felt. His name was Anthony, and if you met him, you might not remember him. Not because he wasn't kind, he was, but because he was quiet, modest. The kind of man who blended into the background, making sure everyone else was comfortable while he stayed just outside the spotlight. He worked in accounting, a steady job, a stable life. Married Margaret when he was 31. Not because of a whirlwind romance, but because of a soft, patient love that built itself quietly over time. They had their routines. Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks in silence, the same seats at the local diner for 38 years. They were good to each other. Not perfect, but loyal, comfortable, safe. But Anthony, as grounded as he was, carried something unspoken. He loved her deeply, more than he ever said, more than he ever showed. She knew, he told me once, staring out the window at the garden she used to tend. She had to know. But then, his eyes dropped, his hand trembled slightly, and after a long pause, he whispered, "I wish I had said it more." He remembered the little things, how she always left the light on when he worked late, how she folded his clothes with a care that felt like prayer, how she would dance in the kitchen when no one was looking, except he was always looking. But he never told her. Not really. He assumed she already knew. He thought love was obvious, that actions spoke louder. And maybe they did. But words matter too. And time, as he learned, doesn't wait for the perfect moment. One morning, Margaret stepped outside to water the roses. She never came back in. It was quick. Peaceful, they said. But Anthony wasn't ready. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. All the I love yous unsaid, all the compliments he held back, all the feelings he thought he'd share later. There's something I'll never forget about the way he said this next part. He didn't cry. He didn't break down. He just looked up at me, his voice barely a breath, and said, "She deserved to hear it more than I deserved the chance to say it." That line has lived in me ever since. So if you're holding something back, something kind, something loving, something real, don't wait. Say it. Say it today. Say it now. Even if you stumble. Even if your voice cracks. Even if it feels awkward. Because the words you bury may one day be the ones you ache to dig up. Long after it's too late. Regret number 2. I let fear choose for me. Her name was Dolores. She was the kind of girl who carried a sketchbook instead of a purse. Every page stained with dreams, sunsets, sorrow, strangers she only saw once. She didn't need recognition. She just needed color. A way to speak without needing words. At 16, she stood in the doorway of her father's garage, holding a canvas like it was made of glass. "I want to be a painter," she said. He looked up from the engine, wiped grease from his hands, smiled with tired eyes. Then he said it, soft, but heavy. "Art doesn't pay the bills, sweetheart. The world's too sharp for soft things." She nodded. Not because she agreed, but because it was easier to believe someone else's fear than to fight for your own joy. Her teachers said she had something rare, a way of seeing the world that most people forgot by adulthood. But even that praise, even those sparkles of encouragement, couldn't drown out the doubts in her mind. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if people laugh? So she chose the safer road, became a secretary, meticulous, efficient, invisible. She married, raised 2 boys, cooked, cleaned, scheduled, smiled. And when no one was watching, in the garage her father once worked in, she painted. On cereal boxes, on old newspaper, on the back of envelopes and grocery lists. She never showed anyone. Not because they weren't beautiful, but because fear still lived inside her hands. At 76, Dolores has drawers full of paintings, unframed, unseen, uncelebrated. One day, she pulled out a piece she made when she was 17. A self-portrait, not of how she looked, but how she felt. Vivid, wounded, hopeful. And she asked me something I'll never forget. "Do you think it still counts if no one ever saw it?" The truth is, we don't regret the dreams we chased and failed. We regret the ones we locked in the attic, the ones we silenced before they even had the chance to speak. Fear is persuasive. It dresses itself up as wisdom. But more often, it's just a cage we decorate to feel safe inside. So if you've been holding a dream quietly, if there's something inside you you still want to do it. Do it badly. Do it imperfectly. But do it now. Because someday, the only voice louder than fear will be the whisper of regret, asking why you never tried. Regret. 3. I didn't make time for the right people. George used to laugh in full paragraphs, the kind of laugh that filled a room and pulled others in like gravity. He had a group, 5 men who had weathered storms together. College, heartbreak, weddings, even a bar fight in 1968, they still laughed about 40 years later. They called themselves the Brotherhood. Not because it was serious, but because it felt true. Every summer, they returned to the same cabin by the same lake in upstate New York. No phones, no clocks, just fishing poles, whiskey at dusk, and stories that grew taller with every year. But then, life. George got married. The others did too. Babies were born. Careers took over. One summer, he missed the trip. Then another. "I'll go next year," he said. But next year came and went. He meant to call. He meant to write. But something always came up, and friendships don't scream when they're being neglected. They just fade, quietly. Now, at 82, George returns to that cabin alone. The same lake, the same porch, but 5 chairs and only 1 body. "I thought we had time," he told me once, watching the water ripple with late summer wind. "I thought those calls could wait." He paused, then added something that stays with me. "You think they'll always be there, until they're not. And then you'd give anything to hear their voice just once more. So I ask you now, who are the people you've been meaning to call? To write to? To see? Not the ones who expect something from you, but the ones who saw you before you became who you are. The ones who made you laugh with your whole chest. Find them. Even if years have passed. Even if it's awkward. Even if you're not sure what to say. Because one day, you'll remember their birthday a little too late. You'll hear their name in a conversation they're not part of. And the silence that follows will ache, like a song that never got to finish then. Regret number 4. I didn't take care of my body sooner. Her name was Eileen. She had strong hands, the kind that baked bread without a recipe, braided her daughter's hair in 5 minutes flat, and held babies like she was born to do it. But her strength wasn't loud. It lived in the way she showed up for everyone else. For decades, Eileen was the first to rise. She brewed the coffee before the birds had even started singing. She packed lunches with quiet precision. She drove everyone everywhere, soccer practice, school drop-offs, grocery runs with coupons folded neatly in her purse. And she told herself, again and again, that she'd take care of herself once things slowed down. But they never did. Because caretakers don't get sick days. Because women like Eileen are taught that love means putting yourself last. So she skipped doctor's appointments. She told herself she was just tired. She ignored the stiffness in her knees until the stairs became mountains. By her late 60s, Eileen found herself sitting more than moving. The body that once carried groceries and grandchildren now resisted the simplest tasks. But the moment that broke her heart wasn't medical. It was at a wedding. Her granddaughter begged her to dance. The music was soft and slow, the kind she used to sway to in the kitchen. But her knees wouldn't let her rise. She sat there, clapping with a smile she didn't feel, watching life pass in circles around a dance floor she couldn't step onto. Later that night, she looked at herself in the mirror and said something she'd never admitted before. I was so busy taking care of everyone else that I forgot to carry myself. Here's the truth. The body keeps score. It remembers the years of neglect. And eventually it will ask for what it was denied. But here's the other truth. Your body still wants to help you. It wants to heal, to move, to support your life, even now. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need a gym or a routine or a plan. You just need to begin. Stand up during commercials. Stretch while the kettle boils. Take the longer route. Breathe deeper. Rest longer. Drink water like it's sacred. Because your body, even with the aches, even with the weight it carries, is still rooting for you. Don't make it wait until it breaks to finally feel seen. Regret number 5. I didn't let myself be happy. Robert once told me something that struck like lightning. I lived my whole life like happiness was a reward you had to suffer to earn. He grew up in a house with no soft edges. Smiles were brief. Laughter was rationed. And pleasure, well, that was something you were supposed to feel guilty about. His father worked 3 jobs. His mother scrubbed floors until her knuckles split. So Robert learned early that life was supposed to be hard, that joy was for the rich, or the foolish, or the selfish. He went on to build a life that looked impressive on paper. A good career, a home with hardwood floors, 2 children with college degrees. But he never quite knew how to feel good. Even in celebration, he held tension in his shoulders. Even on vacations, he checked his watch. He didn't smile in photos because he didn't trust the feeling. I was always waiting for something to go wrong, he said, as if joy was a trap that would punish me for falling into it. At 84, Robert still has a sharp mind, but he speaks softly now, as though his thoughts are fragile. And maybe they are. He says his biggest regret is not the life he lived, but the joy he postponed, the laughter he muted, the softness he denied himself because he thought it wasn't earned. Let me say this clearly. You do not need to suffer in order to deserve joy. You do not need to prove your worth by staying exhausted. You do not need to postpone your pleasure until the house is clean and the world is calm. Joy doesn't knock. It slips in quietly, through music, through memory, through the smell of soup, or the warmth of the sun. Let it in. Not because everything is perfect, but because joy is how you survive the imperfection. You are allowed to be happy. You are allowed to feel good. Not later, not when things settle, but now, exactly as things are. I wonder, did any of these stories feel like yours? Even a little? A line? A sentence? A shadow of a memory? Regret doesn't mean you failed. It means you're still learning, still listening, still alive. So if something came up for you, a moment you remembered, a dream you've been postponing, a truth you've never said, the comments are open for you. You don't need to write a poem. You don't need to explain it. You just need to speak it for yourself, for your peace, for someone else who might be reading and feel less alone because of your words. These 5 regrets, they aren't uncommon. They don't belong to the few. They belong to many, to most. And not because people were ungrateful or lazy or selfish, but because they were human, trying to make it through each day the best way they knew how. Regret doesn't always come from big failures. Sometimes it comes from all the little silences, the pauses that lasted too long, the things we told ourselves we'd get to later, but never did. Not one person I've spoken with over 70 has ever told me they regret showing love, or being vulnerable, or laughing too much, or choosing rest when the world told them to keep pushing. But you know what they do regret? They regret the letter they never sent, the relationship they never mended, the dream they never allowed themselves to chase, the walk they didn't take because their knees were aching and they thought they'd do it next week. They regret growing careful when they should have grown bold. They regret growing numb when they needed to stay soft. They regret surviving without ever truly living. There's a myth that time heals all wounds, but I've learned that time only deepens the wound if you never go back to tend it. So maybe today is your moment to go back, not to punish yourself, but to plant something new. You're not too late, not for joy, not for connection, not for healing, not for beauty. You are exactly on time to forgive yourself, to choose again, to say the thing, to become who you thought it was too late to become. Life has a strange way of meeting you right at the edge of your courage. So take one step, write one message, make one small change, and tomorrow, do it again. That's how a life becomes whole, not through grand gestures, but through brave, gentle ones. If these stories touched you, if they reminded you of something you've carried quietly for years, subscribe and stay with us. This space is for you, for the ones who reflect deeply, for the ones who feel things quietly, for the ones who are still growing even now. We'll be here again tomorrow with another story, another whisper of wisdom, another reminder that you are not alone in the life you're trying to make peace with.